Alright, today is the day where I paint a portrait in oil pastel, and I'm a little bit dreading it. I've done an oil pastel portrait of Madonna before, which turned out pretty well, but I feel like that portrait was a lot easier because it was done in pop art style, so a lot less details in the skin and all that. For this one, I feel like things are gonna be a little bit more difficult. Honestly, I'm not expecting to go super realistic. I don't even know if it's possible in oil pastels. And I'm dreading it because whenever I try to control oil pastel to make it do what I want it to do, things get a little messy. It's kind of hard to work with. I love it to work in a more expressive way and kind of spontaneously, but to get things more realistically, it's kind of hard. The other reason I'm dreading it is because I put the pressure on myself to make it look as good as I can because I want to give it to David as a Christmas present. So the subject I chose is for David and I really want it to look nice, so two things. I'm gonna use baby oil for blending, especially for the skin tone. When it comes to skin tone, I'm gonna have some contrast for sure, but I'm gonna help the blending process with baby oil. And for the background, I'll be using acrylic paint as a solid background color. Because it's a solid block of color, I feel like acrylic paint is the better choice. Why complicate my life and waste a whole bunch of oil pastel for the background? Doesn't make sense. And I'll be using my very best oil pastels for this. So Sennelier, Mungyo Gallery, maybe Pentel Artists. We'll see. all done. This came out really differently than I thought it would. At first, I thought I would have a more blended look. That's why I wanted to use baby oil, but I ended up not using baby oil. As I was working through the painting, I was creating more of an expressive effect with a lot of contrasts, and I was really enjoying that effect, so I kept going with it instead of trying to stick to my initial idea of having a more blended effect. From experience, sticking to a preconceived image of something that I had in advance, it never really worked for me, as opposed to kind of let go and see what works on the canvas as I'm doing something. I enjoy the surprise as well, because this final portrait is kind of different than what I had envisioned, but I really like the result. Something I want to point out is that I used Syndia oil pastel for this portrait, which made all the difference in the world because they're so creamy, buttery. It's easy to layer a lot of pigment on top of each other and create those vivid colors and expressive effect. With other brands, it's not the case. You can't layer as much, so the effect would have been different. Some bits of this portrait came out organically really well, but other bits I struggled with. I would say that the skin tone came together without me really putting too much effort into it. But with the hair, I had some struggles. I wasn't sure about the texture. I wasn't sure about the colors. I knew I wanted a base of natural colors like browns and blacks, but I wanted to incorporate some of those teals, pinks, and like bolder colors, but I didn't want it to look clumsy. I wanted to have a cohesion to it. At some point, I even scraped off most of the hair that I had done initially because I didn't like the texture I was getting and also the color application that I had initially. And in the end, I found I got a good balance between those bold colors, the texture, and the browns. I always find it hard to know at what point to stop and feel like a piece is completely finished. But as I've said a lot, waiting a couple of weeks to look at it with a fresh eye usually works. The things that I don't really love as much usually bother me more and more with time. And if it's not the case, then the painting kind of gels as a finished product and I don't want to touch it. But I'll know that in a couple of weeks. I want to put resin on this the same way I did with the Madonna portrait. I love the finish. I'm gonna wait for this to harden and dry. As you know, oil pastels don't really dry, but they harden with time. They become less oily and less movable, which is a good thing. I'll wait for that to happen, then I'll put some resin on top of it, make it super glossy and nice and scratch proof. I'm also thinking of making a companion piece to this guy. I have a few ideas, maybe McCartney to my Lennon, or a second Lennon but even more expressive, bordering on fully abstract in oil pastel. I still have to think about it. I will vlog the whole process of putting art resin on this and making the companion piece, of course. If you don't want to miss it, hit the bell for notification. Just a thought. If you'd like more inspiration, you can watch this one. It's a good one. And I will see you in just a few days for another one. Bye.